Well, we're here to talk about the Santee MSCP Subarea Plan. So what is that? It's essentially, it's an effort to bring together a number of efforts into a coordinated citywide system of open space, and that allows for protected biological open space along with parks and trails and a balanced build out of the general plan. And so some of the objectives are that you have a protected open space, and this program will lead to take authorizations, which is essentially a way of describing permits through the Endangered Species Act. And this program is designed to streamline that process and ultimately set up a program where you have enhanced biological corridors that are protected into the future. So a little bit of background: the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973, and over time has been laying out a set of rules and regulations about how that Endangered Species Act gets implemented. And that has included the development of regional conservation plans, and we'll talk a little bit further about that as we go. California has a very comparable parallel system that was passed in 1970 for it, the California Endangered Species Act, and then in 1991 passed the NCCP Act, Natural Communities Conservation Program Act, and that lays out a process by which these regional conservation plans can be established. And the way that these work is essentially you have the state and federal agencies that are responsible for implementing your endangered species regulations. They issue permits down to the local agencies. So in this case, they would issue a permit down to the city of Santee, and then the city of Santee can use those permits for their own projects as well as delegate the authorization down to private developments. This is a process that's been going on within San Diego County, and back in the 90s, there was what was called the San Diego Multiple Species Conservation Program, the Subregional Plan, and it covered the southwestern third of San Diego County. And then the way it works is it sets out a framework by which each jurisdiction then adopts their own individual sub-area plan. And so a number of the other jurisdictions within the county have already adopted their sub-area plans and have been implementing this process of complying with endangered species regulations over the last number of years. So for Santee, actually, began this process back in 1997 and was developing a sub-regional plan at that point in time, and then moved forward with getting a draft plan in the 2000s, and then when the recession hit, kind of the housing demand stopped and the program kind of got put on hold. It's come back up. We started in 2015, and we've been moving it forward, and we'll get to a public review draft here this summer. So a little background is like, what is a sub-area plan? Essentially what you're trying to do is come up with a process that balances how you set aside conservation along with approving development into the future. And a series of benefits that we usually point out that come with these types of plans that are from an environmental, economic, and community benefits. So from an environmental standpoint, the goal is to maximize the biological outcomes by protecting your larger blocks of habitat, protecting the habitat so it's connected and allows for corridors and wildlife movement, and then setting out a process by which those lands are managed and monitored over time in long term. From an economic standpoint, once this plan is in place, you're looking to streamline these regulations. So right now, when you deal with endangered species permitting on a project-by-project basis, it takes time. It's not always a clear, straight path. The goal is to provide that level of regulatory certainty and streamlined effort. You're not creating new obligations. You're just creating a new direction as to how those regulations get implemented. And the other economic benefit is that having these plans in place allows for the city to apply for grant funding for a number of other opportunities that are out there. And the city has put quite a bit of time and effort into this, and so their goal is to get this done and receive that return on this investment. And then from the community standpoint, having a sub-area plan in process or in place fulfills a lot of the goals of the general plan to see that balance between conservation and development, and it's also going to be in sync with a number of other city initiatives in terms of seeing the San Diego River enhancements and improvements, improve that San Diego River experience, having a connected trail system and helping to see and improve that process. And then ultimately, there's benefits from the community standpoint of bringing this decision-making down to the local level. So the community is going to be able to work with the local planners, have better communication, better experience in moving forward their projects than trying to work with state and local environmental or getting their permits through the state and local agencies. So the way these plans move forward, you have to identify specific species that get covered. And so those are the listed plants and animals that are currently listed or likely to be listed by the federal and state agencies. So in the city of Santee, there's about 20 species that sort of met that criteria. The Natural Communities Conservation Program also equally emphasizes protection of natural habitats, and so in Santee, you're looking at coastal sage scrub, chaparral, grassland habitats, and also the riparian habitats. And then, so we've gone through in the plan and began to identify all of the set of covered activities and covered projects so that we are estimating how much future impacts are likely to occur. So there's specific hardline projects. So these are projects that have known development plans. So there's a couple, Finita Ranch and Parkview, that are included in the plan as hardline projects. And we also have identified or estimated how much future development will occur as part of the general plan, but also based off the sub-area plan conditions that are included. And then there's other development and maintenance activities, including roads and bridges, new trails, and also maintenance of trails or maintenance of drainage facilities. All those are identified, and the plan sort of sets out rules and procedures as to how those impacts are addressed, and fuel management and defensible space. Specifically for the San Diego River, have a conservation strategy that emphasizes a trail system that will be connected around the north and the south sides along the edges of the river outside of the floodway, and then allowing a level of some additional future disturbance within the floodway, but those actions are going to still need to provide for the conservation and no net loss of any aquatic and riparian habitat, and the plan identifies where there are opportunities for that conservation and restoration, particularly of the riparian and aquatic habitats. So within the plan, there's an overall conservation strategy, and it's kind of easiest to summarize that by looking at this preserve map that has the dark green are the hardline conservation areas. So those are the areas where we already know on these projects where they're going to have on-site conservation, and those areas are going to be put into preserve and managed as preserve lands. There'll also be off-site mitigation for as part of this plan in the East Elliott and also up in towards the Alpine area for helping to cover Kino and Hermes butterfly impacts. And then the yellow areas are the upland standards areas, so the plan will establish procedures by which the city is going to make sure that there's a level of conservation, basically keeping to a 70% conservation within those areas in yellow, still allowing development to occur, but in a managed way. And then as we mentioned, specifically within the San Diego River, we've identified these conservation opportunity areas. And then also within Santee, there's existing protected land. So, and some of those are managed at different levels. They've been set aside as project mitigation, or you have existing conservation lands from Mission Trails Regional Park, other lands that have been acquired from conservancies. And so the goal of the plan is to try to knit those all together into one cohesive open space system. So we're linking up and tying in with existing conserved lands. So what's going to come before the council is a final sub-area plan. So that was sub-area plan document itself, and then a joint part of that will also be an implementing agreement. So because the state and federal agencies are delegating this authority down to the local level, there's a legal agreement between those entities and the city of Santee. So that implementing agreement is that legal document. And then a CEQA document, an EIR that addresses the sub-area plan and the adoption of the sub-area plan itself. And we are going to include within, as appendix to the sub-area plan, two portions that are implementation that are a habitat loss and incidental take ordinance that will lay out a permitting process by which if a project comes in, it has direct impacts to natural habitat, you'll have to get the habitat loss and incidental take permit, and the ordinance will sort of lay out that checklist and a cookbook as to how that permitting process will occur. And then the general plan itself will go through some amendments to make sure that there's consistency between the sub-area plan and the general plan. So a notice of preparation was issued last Friday on the 17th. We're having the public workshop here this evening, and then next Thursday, on the 30th is an EIR scoping meeting, and with the opportunity for the public to come in and provide written comments, and we'll have boards and people there to answer questions and communicate more about the details of the plan at that point, and then work towards developing the document ready for public review along with the EIR in the summer, and there'll be additional public workshops during that public review time period, and scheduled to have a public hearing for final adoption December 2023.